seem to need very much help. You can sit just there. There you go. And just that one, and I'll sit here. The trick is to work together to invent and execute the innovations that will get us successfully to the other side. So, delighted to have two men with us doing the hard work. We have the Minister of State for AI, Digital Economy and Remote Work Applications here, host from the UAE. Thank you so much for being with us, His Excellency Omar Sultan Al Lama. Delighted also to have with us India's Minister for Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship, Honorable Rajeev Chandrasekhar. Thanks very much. Fantastic. Oh, we can do better than that. Come on, huge round of applause for both of them. Right. That's what we like. So let's get us started. Your Excellency, you have said before that you see India's digital fingerprints all around you. Tell us what you mean.
I think I'll be known for this quote for the rest of my life. Actually, just to make a correction, I did not say digital, I said fingerprint.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because if you look at any company, any tech company, any solution that people use today, and if you dig deep, you'll find an Indian there doing some of the hard work. And that is just testament to how robust, how incredible the talent is, regardless of where they are. So if you look at Europe, you'll find Indian talent building the tech ecosystem in Europe. If you look at the Middle East, if you look at the US, if you look at Latin America, if you look at Asia. And in my humble opinion, I think that what we're seeing right now in terms of the Indian tech scene booming and the digital scene booming is just the beginning. So we've seen Indian talent around the world build the digital landscape. I think at this point of time, they're going to go back to India and make India the capital of technology globally.
I can see you nodding. I know you're with His Excellency. You know, I'm from California, which for many years we set the rules on automobile emissions by being tougher and smarter than other states. And in the West, there are many people who think that Europe has emerged as this role of setting the rules for big technology companies. But in my conversations over the last couple of days, I think that we're missing a trick, and it feels to me like India could well be setting the stage as the big giant there. What do you think?
I won't disagree with you to start with. I think, I look at it a little differently. I don't think we are in a race with Europe or any other country for that matter. We see the technology opportunity very differently, I think. We see the need to protect our consumers' rights to data as one clear obligation that we have. But we don't see that as a binary or at the expense of excluding or, in a sense, slowing down the innovation ecosystem that is underway in India and in partnerships with other nations that work with India. So I think we have evolved a framework, and I think you're alluding to the Digital Personal Data Protection Law, and there was this narrative that the European GDPR was the gold standard. And I have said, when a question was posed to me recently about that, I said, look, we respectfully beg to disagree. We think we will chart our own course. We are, as you know, 820 million Indians online. We are the largest presence on the global internet. And so we deserve an opportunity to shape our own destiny and lay out the rules and laws that should govern the future of the internet on our own. So I think that is where we come from. We see this opportunity as something very important for our young Indians. And we have framed this framework of rules and laws that will, like I said, address what seemed to be a binary of consumer protection versus innovation. We've managed to do both.
Interesting. So I'm going to get some big questions out here at the beginning, but I am going to turn to the audience. So have a think about what you would like to be asking them. I wonder, Your Excellency, what's the message from the FTX debacle that you take home? Do you think the world needs stronger regulation of cryptocurrency to protect the potential benefits? And who should those regulators be? And I think it's really interesting because the folks that I've spoken to here about metaverse, Web3, crypto, blockchain, a very different reaction than when I speak to people in the US about what's happened.
So first, Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested today. So for those of you who really care about the issue, I think justice is going to be served soon, right after he is able to disclose why he did what he did. I am pro-regulation for a number of reasons. First, if you look at what the UAE did, our Virtual Asset Regulation Authority went and issued FTX a MVP license. What an MVP license is, it's a license not to allow these companies to operate, but tell them, come and open your books. Show us how you operate. Show us the actual inner workings of your company in a way that is trusted from both parties. And I can confidently say that they were not able to present that, right? So that is why FTX did not get a full license. And many other companies as well did not get a full license. One of the reasons that I think regulation is needed, especially when you talk about a new technology, it starts off as a wild, wild west. It starts off with people who say the right things, but might not necessarily be doing the right things. And if you allow for it to continue to grow without any regulations being introduced, without any opinion from the government, then you see the most amount of pain. But when the government comes in, gets involved, and says, look, we're willing to work with you, but try to show us what you're doing and how that works out, and also tell us how you're protecting people, then the chances for error are going to be lower. Think about it this way. In the early 90s, we had the internet becoming mainstream. We had a lot of companies come out. We also saw some of the debacles like pets.com being sold for I don't know how many million, and it turned out to be not worth that much. When the dot-com bubble crashed, people thought that the internet was over, and that's it. Do you know what happened in the same time period? The UAE doubled down and announced a full city for the internet, called the Dubai Internet City, and said, it's not Dubai Microsoft City, it's not Dubai Pets.com City, it's the Dubai Internet City. We believe in the underlying technology. It's the same with blockchain. It's the same with the talent that is in the crypto space. We believe in the talent for those who are doing something genuine, that are doing something good. We believe that blockchain has great applications, and we are going to continuously work towards that. Anyone who's investing in this space, and I say this not to the people in the room, but anyone and everyone that I meet, it is a risky industry. You don't go into a casino looking to make guaranteed returns. Right? You might make returns, but today it is an unproven sector. You should not go into it without being aware of the challenges that might come out there. Again, our job as a government is to try to decipher what's happening, remove ambiguity, and then celebrate those who really do a good job on this front.
Interesting. Minister, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with His Excellency. I will add to that the following, which is that I do believe that governments around the world have lagged behind innovators. And for a number of years and indeed decades, there was almost a free pass to those who came onto the internet. And as long as you said you were doing something innovative, regulators backed off, and there was almost an argument that you don't get governments involved. I think the governments around the world are now catching up to the fact that the internet represents good, internet represents innovation, but the internet also represents user harm, it represents criminality, it represents FTX, it represents all kinds of players. And so therefore there has to be this framework of rules and no-go areas for all platforms. We in India are building that framework, which is not to say that we will strongly regulate. I don't like the use of the word strong regulation with the internet and innovation. These are, in a sense, opposites and contradictions. So we will lay out these boundary conditions of openness, safety and trust and accountability, which we believe will allow the innovators and the true innovators to flourish, and those who want to, do an FTX not to.
So, well, let's talk about one of the innovations that India is continuing to build. We had a whole session today on looking at India's stack, which is absolutely fascinating and still being built, in fact. Really on the cutting edge, India is, of electronic payments. It has been a universe dominated until relatively recently by technology companies from the US and China, but I'd love you to explain, Honorable Minister, the significance of what India is building.
So I think if you go back to the genesis of the India stack and the problem that it was trying to solve, and the problem was that India as this large democracy had for decades been stuck with this narrative that government payments and government subsidies did not really reach the beneficiaries without corruption, without delay, without leakage. And that was famously captured almost as if it was a fate and destiny by a prime minister in the 80s, saying that 100 rupees that left Delhi, only 15 rupees reached the citizens. Right. He almost said that as if it was something that we were fated to endure for the rest of our lives. And then when Prime Minister Narendra Modi came in 2014, he really said we will deploy technology. We will deploy technology to create identities and do identity authentication and then create a layer on top of that which would be payment. So it solved a government problem. It solved a problem of trust between government and citizen, but has spawned a tremendously innovative and tremendously fast-growing ecosystem around what has now become the India stack. The India stack today represents an opportunity for the global south, countries that have, in a sense, been left behind or have not been able to afford the digitization that other advanced nations have been able to invest in. It affords them an opportunity, it gives them an opportunity to rapidly climb up that ladder of digitalization that many other countries have embarked on and successfully achieved. So I think that is what the India stack represents. It represents, for the first time, in a sense, the ability for small countries, large countries, big countries who have, in a sense, been kept away from the technology digitalization opportunity to rapidly climb up that ladder and deliver to their citizens, deliver to their governments the benefits of technology. And so we are very excited by it, and me and the Excellency here have been talking about how we can take the India stack, cooperate, and making sure that's available to more and more countries around the world.
Interesting. So, Excellency, why don't you talk us through what you're thinking? How could the UAE use the India stack? So,
I just want to add on to what His Excellency said. What the India stack provides is honestly a no excuse, unfortunately, mandate for countries that say it can't be done. Whether you are small or big, a country the size of India was able to implement something that is that cutting edge within less than a decade. It is, I cannot state how incredible that is. And it was not imported. The reality of this, what makes it even 10 times more impressive for me as an individual, and I think for a lot of people, is the fact that it was not an imported solution. It's easy for you to plug and play something that's imported. Right. To build it from scratch and to scale it to 1 billion people in less than 10 years, you can't do that even if you're a private business in Silicon Valley. So we go back to the first point I made when I talked about the Indian fingerprint. It just is clear that what we are seeing right now is a snowball that is moving much faster, getting much bigger, from India dominating the sphere globally. And the India tech stack is a great example of that. The thing I would like to say is, look at the diversity of the Indian population internally from the different provinces. If you're able to let everyone agree that this is the right solution and use it in a way where they believe that this is going to be a way for them to empower themselves and make their lives better, and as well have a higher trust within government as well and have less friction, you're able to do it across continents. And that's our belief here, and that's why we're talking with the minister to see what we can do. I don't think that there's a reason why the African continent can't use this stack within itself, as well as in certain countries amongst themselves. Now, maybe there is going to be some requirement for lobbying, maybe there is going to be some requirement for explaining what happens and what doesn't happen on this front. One thing we're doing is we're looking at lessons learned from the India tech stack and seeing how we can move aggressively in the UAE to have a similar solution. I think we are going to take this to other countries that are willing, and the Indian government has been gracious enough to say that we're willing to open it to other countries. So there's a lot to be done. Hopefully both of us are going to be able to do it.
Give me an example of what you have been able to do. I mean, I think about I'm a US taxpayer and a voter. I received my check from President Trump, I think months after it had been written, all the way in the UK. And I believe that when you sent payments to Indian citizens, they arrived within
Instantaneous.
Instantly.
Yeah.
And it took 2 weeks to figure out who needed to get what, and then the payments were actually done in 24 hours, right?
Right.
Any other example you'd give me about what's possible with this?
No, look, I'll tell you my personal experience on this, and I travel quite a bit around the country. I had the opportunity recently to go to a part of India where no minister has visited since independence. And so it was a remote part of the northeast of India, and I reached there, and the next morning there were 500 community members in a room like this, and they obviously were very happy to see a minister and all of that. And I asked them, look, how many of you have this direct benefit transfer, which is the digital, and every one of them put up their hand. And how many of you have been receiving this money instantaneously in your bank account? So this remote location of India, which otherwise would not have seen the presence of the government of India, or would have seen it in very, very exceptional and rare circumstances, was now dealing with the government of India on a real-time basis every day, on regular intervals, and getting all of what was due to them, pensions, subsidies. And during the entire COVID pandemic, there were people who were receiving benefits and payments into their account directly and keeping them safe during the pandemic. So,
how did that make you feel?
Look, we've all been evangelists of technology, but this is some real transformation, real impact on people's lives who otherwise would have been helpless, would have been left to fend for themselves. So I think, in my opinion, the real narrative about India Stack, at least from our point of view, is that it is really mainstreamed every Indian who otherwise would have stayed out of the system, or would have been at the edges and the periphery of the system, and would have had to deal with all of the problems on their own. Now they have been mainstream, they feel empowered, they feel connected, and they feel like they are talking to the government of India at moments of trouble and crisis. So I think that is my experience, and after being 3 decades in technology, I mean, I can tell you this, I mean, I've seen chips being launched and technologies being launched, but to see the people who've been otherwise left out of governance being mainstreamed and connected in this kind of a way through the power of technology is extremely satisfying.
Excellency.
So, I just want to say 2 things. The only way that you can combat bureaucracy is through digitization, because there are certain levels of scale that you cannot achieve with conventional thinking of I'll throw people at the problem and I'll throw conventional infrastructure at the problem. But with digital, you can access people with the speed of light, distance becomes irrelevant, and you're able to get to them 24 hours of the day. So I think the approach that India had was really wise, and I think it was the right approach. One thing that you alluded to a previous question to His Excellency, is the fact that is India part of the race? And I think one important lesson learned, and this is how we approach things in the UAE as well, is if you look at physics, if you're in a race and you start behind someone, you need to be X percentage faster than they are to be able to catch up and then exceed them. If you don't start in the race altogether and go into another race, it's up to them to follow you. I think that's what India did. They did not emulate anyone. They went and they created their own path that today others are emulating. And I think with the UAE as well, when it comes to looking at the India stack, what we want to do internally is take the learnings from India, because we have these joint meetings at all times, and then see how we can carve out our own path that is relevant for a country of our size, that's relevant for a country of our position as well.
What are the kinds of things that you're interested in exploring with the stack technology?
Well, look at, I think the government applications are proven, right? The ID, internet access, banking, etc. What's really interesting to me personally, because I lead also the digital economy side, is how you're able to open up that infrastructure to create companies out of them. Today, we are blessed in the UAE to have a lot of incredible companies coming out of the UAE, becoming truly global and being successful. But they are doing it because government is not getting involved in their business. How can government provide them the infrastructure necessary to be able to 10x their outcomes, right? Maybe our infrastructure is different to India's infrastructure. If you look at our global infrastructure when it comes to port operations, right? DP World operates 78 ports around the world. 10% of global trade goes through the UAE, right? how are you able to open this up to create the next logistics unicorn globally? With Emirates Airlines and Etihad, how are you able to open up the aviation data to create the next billion-dollar or decacorn in the aviation industry, services, etc.? So I think what we need to do right now is customize this approach that India has endeavored on to what our strengths are, and then work with India to ensure that there's a win-win situation. Win for the UAE and win for India. And that's what the SEPA agreement is all about.
Interesting. All right. Well, I want to get to the SEPA agreement. I want to make sure we allow the audience to ask a question. Have we got a question for our honorable ministers? Otherwise, I get to keep asking. Any questions? All right. So you mentioned there the SEPA agreement. So, one of the goals of having you both on stage here together is to highlight the importance of partnership. And the SEPA, it's a bilateral trade agreement. It's in the background. So talk me through some of the areas where you think this partnership will flourish.
No, I think there is a tremendous opportunity, and I don't want to really build any sort of boundaries around where we can cooperate and where we shouldn't. But the broader idea through SEPA and these conversations is that we would create these corridors of innovation and trust for technology and innovation of the coming years between entrepreneurs and startups and enterprises in the UAE and the startups and entrepreneurs in India. So I think the broader framework in our mind is that we have what we have. We will continue to expand the opportunity and make it more diverse in terms of technology and innovation in India, move from the consumer tech to semiconductors and electronics and AI and blockchain, but also have these really enduring partnerships between UAE and India and other countries, which are built around these corridors where data can flow, innovation can flow, ideas and products and devices can come out of those partnerships. So I think there's tremendous opportunity in the coming years in terms of what we can do together. And SEPA is just an enabling framework, but I think the minds and the bright minds in India and the UAE will really, hopefully, shape the future of technology.
Do you want to add to that, Excellency?
I think that was a great answer. I also think that there are certain variables of strength that both countries have that can build on each other. And I spoke about this previously. If we think about, first, I have a question to the audience. How far back do you guys think that the UAE-India relationship goes?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you think it's 100 years. 200 years? 500 years? So not forever. So the oldest dated artifact that proves that there was joint trade and cultural interaction between the UAE and India is in a location here in the UAE called Saruq al-Hadid, which proves that there was interactions between both cultures, the Indian culture and the people that lived here 4,000 years ago. So 4 millennia. I think naturally we've always tended to gravitate towards each other because we are close in culture, the people are friendly to each other, and the advantages, the geographical advantages that we both have, whether it's India, the sheer size of India, and the UAE, the way that it becomes a hub and access to the rest of the world, as well as an attractor of people from around the world to come to it, ensures that something like the SEPA agreement is bound to succeed. We will bring, I think, the diversity of talent. We will bring the access of markets. I think India is going to bring the sheer ingenuity of the talent, the robustness of the infrastructure that exists there, the incredible solutions that India is providing internally that they can take to the rest of the world, as well as us bringing the world, if necessary, to India whenever India needs it. So there's a lot that can happen on that front.
Second question for the audience. All right, we do have a brave soul. We're going to bring you the microphone. Introduce yourself and make sure it's a question rather than a statement.
Good evening, gentlemen. This is Krishna Raj. I run an impact-driven EdTech out of India. I happen to be from the same college as His Excellency also. The question for both the ministers, and especially the comment Your Excellency made that you would like to take the India stack and see how UAE can become a harnessing hub for moving into other territories like Africa. So I understand this discussion is happening at a G2G level, but how as entrepreneurs and startups we can get engaged so that instead of we walking alone, how we can collaborate with the government and reach our common missions together?
Great question. Let's look at historical examples, good historical examples of joint progress and improvement. So whether it's US-China is a great example of how much the US was able to do. It was mostly driven by the private sector. The government did very little. So the government agreed with the other government in terms of bilaterals on, and this was in the 80s, right? They agreed on certain principles, and then it was private sector to private sector, people to people, right? Our job is to lay the red carpet and welcome you guys in, whether it's here in the UAE or in India. Our job as well is to have understanding that entrepreneurs are going to be protected in both countries. And our job is also to ensure that there is frictionless flow of talent, of business from countries. Now, when it comes to the India tech stack, when you go and you promote yourself, when you come and say, oh, I have a good solution, people tend to take it with either a grain of salt or tend to feel like, okay, this is not for me. But when you have a third party, another country that actually is friendly to that country coming and saying, look, this works, we've seen it, and if you'd like, we can actually open the doors, it becomes a lot more smooth for the countries to work together. The next step is, after these solutions are embraced by countries, is to see how we can ensure that there is flow of business from India to the countries that embrace the India tech stack, as well as flow of business from the countries that embrace it towards India, whether it's entrepreneurs. And then as well, integration of financial systems, integration of IDs between both countries to ensure that people are able to either get residencies and things like that. I don't think it's going to be a one-size-fits-all. It will always be a negotiation between both countries to see what each one feels comfortable, but we will facilitate for sure as the UAE.
Interesting. Something to add?
Yeah, I won't add too much to that, excepting to say that the private sector and entrepreneurs are obviously central to proliferating the India stack and or customizing it to the demands of the customer country, as the case may be. But what we intend to do, and we have been having this discussion with His Excellency, that we will have a session, a kind of a workshop that we will host in India, where we will invite all potential SIs and other application layer developers and introduce them to our pitch on the India stack, so that you are much more part of that effort of evangelizing the India stack, and it's not just governments doing it. So we will certainly reach out to all of those who are interested and, in a sense, create an ecosystem of private entrepreneurs and startups who can support those countries who seek to adopt the stack.
Excellent. Any other question? Yeah, there's one back there. Keep your hand up. Yeah.
My name is Lakshmanan. This question is to Honorable Minister from India, Rajeev Chandrasekhar. With India assuming its presidency of G20, how is India looking at leveraging the India stack to the G20? And I know India has invited UAE part of the G20, and UAE has very successfully done the Coders initiative, which has developed that. How is India looking at combining forces with UAE and taking this across to the world? Thank you.
I think the previous answer and the previous responses were in part answers to your question. I think we are going to work together, which is the point that both of us have mentioned. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi ji, has already said publicly that India stack is something that India will offer and work with other partners to ensure that that offering is available to the global south, countries of the global south, and those who don't have their own technology and they want to progress on this path of digitalization. So that is our avowed goal, our stated intention. We will work with partners as we've discussed, and we will of course involve the private sector and entrepreneurs and startups to make that happen. That is the long and short of what I can say at this point. But as this unfolds, and as in these various engagements, more and more countries show an interest in engaging with the India stack, we will progressively modulate our strategy and evolve the partnerships for that.
Interesting. I've got a question. A big priority for India is to enhance its place globally in semiconductor electronics manufacturing. How can the partnership between India and the UAE help this objective?
Look, Eddie, I actually think that, like I said earlier, I don't think there are any limits to this partnership. And to simply assume that this is about the internet only, or this is only about consumer tech, or it's only about the India stack, is a misreading of the real potential that exists between India and UAE, and really the design that has been put into place around this corridor of innovation and technology that we are trying to build. I think semiconductor design, microelectronics, innovation around AI, innovation around blockchain, high-performance computing, all of these areas are of deep interest to us, and I suspect deep interest to the startups and entrepreneurial ecosystem in the UAE. And I am here, and we are working very closely together with His Excellency to see if these can be co-development models, because the time of the past where there were some countries who sort of built technologies and then sort of hung on to them and hung on to them is, in my opinion, a dated model. The model of the future is where partners co-develop technologies for the future, entrepreneurs under the enabling framework of governments that trust each other, develop these innovations for the future. And that, in my opinion, by saying that, I say that it automatically does not limit us to only A or B. And I have had already conversations with His Excellency about semiconductors and electronics, and we will explore that as we go forward.
Okay, interesting. So our time is up, but last word to Your Excellency. Thanks very much for hosting us here in the UAE. What's your message to the folks who are here, founders, funders, we've got entrepreneurs and investors. What's your message in terms of partnership and the next year? So
the next year, that's a loaded question.
20 days.
Yeah. Well,
next 365 days.
Okay, so my hunch is this. We hear the rhetoric globally about looming recession, about startups getting affected, about many different things being said, whether it's on the crypto space with FTX and other fronts as well. I think it's time that we don't start seeing ourselves in the lens of other geographies. We are just getting started. And I think that today this is our time. This is our time as a region. This is our time as countries. This is our time as investors, as entrepreneurs, as solution providers. And it is still greenfield because there's a lot that needs to happen that has not happened yet. So my ask for all of you is don't let the noise affect your planning. Yes, we might see some turbulence, but the turbulence should just make us more excited about how fast we can go and how far we can go. Another thing is, I think what is heartwarming and what really makes me optimistic is in a global rhetoric where people are talking about polarization, isolationism, the end of globalization. We have countries like the United Arab Emirates and India that are talking about more collaboration, more cooperation, more co-creation, and talking about a future that is a future of many rather than the future of few. So I'm very optimistic. I think that pessimism has never motivated people. It's always been optimism. And I think that it's our leaders today, the leaders of India and the UAE, that are rallying people to create a better future, and it's on us to do it. Thank you.
Fantastic final words. Well, thank you very much, both of you gentlemen. Let's give them a round of applause from India Global Forum. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Thank you. Thanks very much. Up to you. Well, I'm going to bring my co-host, Mark Barton, back up on stage. Mark, what a day.
Yeah. What a good day.
What a good day. What's your takeaway?
I mean, despite the economic, geopolitical backdrop, the optimism was infectious, cautious optimism, whether talking about India, opportunities for both founders and funders. I was quite surprised. I think in our bubble in London, because London is a bit gloomy, both on a weather front and on a political front.